Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Eternal Remedies 7 podcast. This is the third installment of our plastic/artificial series, where our quarterly publication takes on a topic. And aside from the very well-crafted magazine that we release, we introduce a podcast series where we have really interesting guests with really cool stories that tackle the conversations that we have, that we explore in the magazine. So today is no exception to that. We're very excited to have very accomplished, distinguished guests in the house today. One whose voice you've heard from before, named Chris Gould, and the other who we're very privileged to have featured today is Nicola. I'm going to give you guys both the floor to introduce yourselves, but we have a good show for you today.
I'll go first. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on here again, Steph. And I'm really excited. Just a little bit about me. I'm an entrepreneur and been doing a side hustle and a full-time job and kind of looking into that. The new entrepreneur of this day and age has been a focus for me. So really excited to be back on here.
Hi, I'm Nicola Davis. I'm born and raised in London with a short stint in New York. And I am a strategist for a cultural agency called Loud that's within Mixcloud. And on the side, I do some music journalism as well. So somewhat tapped into popular culture, but we'll see.
Excellent. So without further ado, let's dive into question number one, which is setting the parameters around what we want to dive into today, which is about what it means to be plastic/artificial in a cultural setting, or what a plastic/artificial culture might even be. So I'm going to start with you, Chris, and ask you, what do you think a plastic/artificial culture is, and can you provide a couple examples?
Yeah, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is something that lacks depth, something that's shallow. So to me, that would represent someone or a segment of people or a group that maybe there's not a lot of good reasoning for why certain things are being done. You might only get a few levels deep before kind of people run out of answers of why they're doing what they're doing. That to me is kind of the plastic artificial culture if I would snapshot it.
I think for me, I feel like plastic, when I looked it up, like what really does plastic mean? It fit into a few different buckets. And I think there's one, which is the synthetic artificial side of things. So basically a culture where everything is very surface level, created from something, doesn't have much substance, not foundation, no roots, no heritage, nothing like that. I think there's another one, which is something which is very replicable, very disposable. So something which has no sort of long-term relevance. It's something which is very, very transient, which is, temporal, which doesn't feel like it's going to last test of time. And then something which is a bit more impressionable, easily molded. So maybe something potentially which is, even with like a leader, with like one leader, and therefore their sort of followers, or you might want to call them, is somewhat impressionable, herd-like mentality, which can apply to lots of cultures. So you don't want to apply the brush to too many people. But I think those three to me are what sort of stand out.
Very nice. So that both your answers have already sparked a lot of avenues we can take this, but I'm curious to know why first we might, as a group or even as individuals, differentiate between plastic/artificial cultures and groups versus, I guess, more authentic, true, real cultures and groups. What do you think is present there when we're looking to create a space between the two?
I'll take that one first. I mean, I tend to bring this back to the individual and kind of our base level need to feel important. And sometimes I think that the way we differentiate and say this certain group is plastic or this certain group is fake and I'm more authentic than them, or one group is more authentic than another, is a way of rationalizing our own importance and our kind of rationalizing our place in the world as having meaning, is what I would think. That's sort of the most harsh way to look at it. I would have to say.
I think leading on from that, for me, I think it comes definitely from a place of insecurity, of someone's own insecurity, maybe whether it's large or small, in feeling like those people are doing something which I don't necessarily approve of, but I think deep down there's always something which we're jealous of and that we wish we could do it. For whatever reason we're not going to, maybe because it doesn't fit what we perceive our personality to be, or it's not authentic to us. But maybe, you know, life would be easier if we didn't have such a conscience about ourselves and we were just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna do what I want to do, and I don't care how it looks the outside, because that's what it matters, right? Like if everyone you know, if you know, insecurities and judging people and projecting and all of that, it's really just because of what we think other people think about us, and those who we feel are more authentic are largely those who we feel are doing what they do for themselves and for no one else.
I just want to, that's a really interesting point. And I think that the insecurity and the jealousy you kind of touched on there, I mean, if I'm being honest, when I'm in Los Angeles where I live and I see, you know, a guy driving down the road with a Ferrari convertible and he's got a beautiful girlfriend with fake breasts and collagen in her lips, and I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh, those people, there's no way they can be happy, you know? But at the same time, like, if I was driving that Ferrari and I have the beautiful girlfriend next to me, and like, who am I to make that assumption? It helps me feel better about not having that stuff, to say, oh, that's lesser inherently. And I think it is a defense mechanism to kind of protect where I am in life, to pass that judgment so quickly. But upon reflecting, it really doesn't feel too good to pass that sort of judgment as I look back on it. So that's a really good point you made on that.
It's funny, as you guys both gave your responses, I was reflecting on the original definitions that you also gave and was just thinking, what we haven't really clarified, or what hasn't been made clear to me yet, is who are we actually speaking to when we are judging a culture being plastic / artificial? Is it the individuals? Is it the guy driving down Rodeo with his hot plastic girlfriend beside him? Or are we talking about the people who value and who practice and who believe that is a higher way of living? So could you guys take a moment to speak upon what do you think is actually meant when we are, I guess, defining or labeling a group of people as plastic / artificial? Are we speaking to someone that actually exists, or is it just a set of norms and customs?
That's a really interesting question. I feel like, I mean, without sounding boring, probably both, right? I feel like there is one side which is norms and customs that you could attribute to a plastic type person or group of people, which is that they are, as we said before, like impressionable, or it's like it's very like trend heavy, and nothing's very permanent, and so on and so on. And then the type of person, though, I think is more interesting, and I think comes to, you know, what is that type of person. And I think it's also like, let's not get on our pedestal here. Like, none of us are 100% authentic to ourselves. Like, I mean, I definitely can't say that about myself anyway, you know, like, and everyone has, I think, elements of this plasticity within them, elements where you want to feel or be seen to be a certain way or heard a certain way. And therefore it's just like at what magnitude, right? does a person become plastic versus they just have elements of plasticity within them? And I think,
Right.
you know, is that just, you know, is it avoidance of their own thoughts, avoidance of being alone with their thoughts, avoidance of something bad that's happened, and they can only deal with it by removing themselves from who they should be, where their trajectory in life should have taken them. They are rerouting themselves on a seemingly artificial path. They've like made their own path, literally, as it's not one that's already sort of set in their way, and they've made their own path, which shouldn't have been the one that they follow. But you know, if it works for them, I mean, that's the question. If does it work for them? I don't know. But if it works for them, then really, who are we to put that label on someone?
Mm-hmm. I think to piggyback on what you said, Nicola, the second one there, you said, are we talking about individual people, or are we just kind of generalizing about people that fall into these, you know, people that wear Lululemon that go to Equinox? Sorry for all of you that I wear Lululemon.
Yeah, you both wear Lululemon.
I love Lululemon, actually. But I think that, like, generalizing people into this category is a way to like help us better understand and like rationalize things. Ultimately, though, I personally feel that that's like a cop-out for me, and it's unfair, because it just allows me to not have to deal with or interact with certain people by being like, they're like this, which in itself like is still, that's in the vein of racism and sexism and ageism and all that. By saying like, oh, people that look that certain way go to those places, they must be like this. So this conversation is making me challenge my own preconceived notions that maybe subconsciously have been there. And like, I'd actually like to engage with some of these plastic people, because I know when I see them, I'm like, no, I don't even try to engage.
Right.
And so I think I'm only assuming who they are based on this generalized idea. I don't have a ton of like direct interaction with people that I look at and classify as plastic based on their outward appearance.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something really powerful that we haven't yet spoken on in this series, is the dismissiveness of people who, and personalities, whatever it is, who are what we call quote unquote plastic, because that also introduces this hierarchy. Like, there's inferior, superior, there's better, there's worse. And we are taking this posture of being above, almost. And I think that segues quite nicely to the next question, because, you know, Nicola and I speak about this a lot, just like hype beast culture. And, you know, if you were to ask them at the individual level, they all think they're super real and like true and authentic, but really they fall into these very monolithic beliefs and approaches and behaviors that very closely resemble each other, you know. And so that almost suggests a certain plastic, and that it's not very unique or true or intrinsic of the individual. It's kind of just like following the group. So would you guys think there's something there, if I were to say that there's a certain plastic almost in authentic culture?
You want to take this one?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is where it gets a little bit tricky, right? Because what we define as the culture is, you know, the streetwear hypebeast kind of culture in some form or another. Is that the person that's queuing up outside Supreme for a new drop? Like, are they part of it? Or are they a sheep and they are following the real culture and the real tastemakers? Like, within that, you know, like, I'm sure that some people, you know, it's so hierarchical. Take a point, Stefan. Like, it within culture, like, it's extremely hierarchical, and I think that's why it's so addictive, because you're like, oh, I've unlocked a new level.
Right.
Like, I've literally found a new way to be a more authentic hype beast, which is in itself being potentially more plastic if we're defining it that way.
Right.
I think, sorry.
Oh no, sorry, you keep going.
I was just gonna say that, you know, hypebeast culture in itself, I mean, it's just you know, it's completely taken over. And you know, in 10 years time, it won't be in the place that it is now. I think that just plays into that thing of that plasticity and plastic culture is not sustainable, and it's not something which we can hang our hat on and which we can say this is always going to, this is, you know, this is the incarnation of it for now, right? And of our time, and of, it's all the context of what we grew up on and who we look up to in music and film and art in Hollywood and so on and so on. And this is what it's become. This is what fashion has become, and it's become a very branded paint by numbers experience for this group of people, and it's doesn't have any creativity in it, honestly. And I think that makes it super easy. Like, yeah, you need some money, and then you're in. That's it. That's all you need. And then with the likes of like Zara and all these fast fashion places, like you can pretend, and like, you know, if you're not trying to reach those levels, if you're 14 years old, you can be a pretend hype beast real easy. Like, you don't even need like $2,000 for a hoodie. So I think that it's it's definitely an onion levels.
I think that's so interesting, and I think you just redefined plastic for me in this moment, because I think plastic represents, there's a transience in that. It's you know, it's kind of coming and fading away, and to me the authentic represents this like lasting, this lastingness, I guess you would call it, of like it withstands time and changes of popular pop culture and what's cool right now. And I think that that's a key difference. I'm just realizing right in the middle of this conversation that, Nicola.
Yeah, it's a brilliant point, and I think something for us to absolutely appreciate, just the vastness of what that covers. You know, there's so many points in life where we delineate groups, and there's always this kind of narrative embedded within, you know, group identity that suggests that the other group has less, you know, less noble, less refined values. And so they're almost essentially made up on more transient things than our more core lasting values. And so I think this is a good place for me to, you know, introduce another vein of thought in asking, when can we make the shift? At what point are we no longer plastic, but we're moving towards authentic? You know, again, reflecting on the fact that what's embedded in us even thinking like that is authentic is better than non-authentic. Authentic is better than plastic. So if we're moving forward, so to speak, if we're evolving into authenticity, what does that transition look like, and when does it happen?
I think it represents a feeling of fulfillment, and I'm not sure if I said this at the beginning of the podcast already, but to me, I think it represents a feeling of fulfillment, and it's not being easily changed by the trends in the moment of whatever is popular, whatever the pressure is from society, from media, from your friends, to not be easily changed by that, but to make your decisions from a thoughtful place. I think that starts to me, if you're making decisions from there, that represents not a plastic way of thinking.
So I kind of agree in principle, but then I think that's very hard in reality, right? Because what are our decisions if not a product of external factors? We don't live in a vacuum, right? We don't. We're not raised in a bubble. Like, everything we do, everything we decide, everything we say is somehow connected to external factors, whether it be conscious or not. And therefore, I think that there's definitely a degree of what you say, which is totally right. Like, you know, you see someone wear something and you go out and buy it the next day because they wore it and you want to look like them. that might be something which is seen to be a bit more superficial. But then again, that's not inspirational. Like, you're inspired by what they want to wear. Doesn't matter if it's Fashion Nova or if it's Dior, like whatever. Like, you wanted to wear that because you thought it would look good, and you wanted to look like that person. So, or whether it be something, you know, more meaningful, like, you know, moving career or moving countries or ending relationship or starting, you know, anything like that. I think it's all based upon how we perceive what's happening around us and what's happened in our past. So I think it's what those external factors are potentially, which is the nuance, versus like assuming that we can't. What it means to be thoughtful is to be in touch with your thoughts and to take in factors which you think are important to you, and knowing what affects you in the best possible way, and being in touch with you is how you make good decisions, right? Not by not by letting things take you as the wind goes.
So it's and I totally agree, you're right. It's having the ability to filter out that external stimuli and say, yep, this is good for me, this is not, as opposed to I'm taking what's given to me as my orders of how I need to be. Yes. I would agree 100%.
So this is interesting, because would this all be to suggest that you become, or you've earned the label of plastic/artificial, if we can even do that, but you've earned the label when you yourself feel like you're being inauthentic and not true to yourself? Or does the label rightfully sit when, you know, an external objective reflection on it suggests that you are? So for example, if you are, you know, a rich businessman in the financial district of New York, and you kiss puppies and you give to philanthropy, and you have a bunch of pictures on your Instagram of you giving away turkeys on Thanksgiving to the homeless, but you go home and you're like, I really don't give a damn about any of this. It's honestly a waste of my time. I do it for the tax exemption. But, you know, I feel like I'm being true to myself for doing this, or I'm not being true to myself for doing this. You know, where is the right answer? Like, where can we actually correctly apply the label? Is it how this person feels about himself? Or is it like, look, he's actually going and giving away turkeys on Thanksgiving? Like, that's a pretty authentic thing. It's a terrible example, but I think you get the point here.
I don't think it's a terrible example. I think it all comes back down to the individual. And if you feel hollow inside, there's your answer. That's what I think. You know,
It's a great answer.
I don't have a lot more than that as a thought on it at this moment.
Yeah, I think it's a good example too, because I think we're assuming like plastic means negative and like trashy and whatever else, but it absolutely doesn't need to be that at all. It's just this facade of something that's not quite attached, right? So you could be like, assume, you know, you have like, you know, depression in housewives that have 3 kids and 2 dogs and live in a nice house.
Right.
Don't feel anything, you know?
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean? So yeah, I think it's it's making sure that we're not just thinking about the obvious examples, and plastic doesn't have to be bad, negative.
And I'd like to say, I think I'd like to characterize plastic in terms of not how we see others, but in terms of how we feel about ourselves. Because one causes us to have to pass judgments. Those people are plastic. Versus the other one is, to me, is like looking at plasticity in terms of being a helpful tool to help people develop. I feel hollow and plastic inside and out, and I want to feel more fulfilled. I want to feel satisfaction. And so it's a tool to let you know you need to change and grow, I think, is where I'd like to put my flag in the sand on plasticity.
Yeah, that's such a powerful point though, because I've really been stuck on something Nicola said earlier around the loss or the diminishing of creativity in plastic living. And I think from what you just said, there's something meaningful about unique, personal, true expression that you're losing, regardless of anyone's outside appraisal of you, when you're engaged in plastic behavior. And it feels like there's a certain meaningful quality of humanness that you forego for the sake of falling into this group and this mold. So as we're wrapping up here, just for the sake of being time conscious, can we speak a little bit around what, you know, this conversation around plastic / authentic cultures and the individuals that inhabit those, what does that say about our humanness? What's like essential about that we need to be focused on or reflect on? And we'll have a follow-up question after that about what feeling do you think we're avoiding by even creating these categories and labels?
I don't know if I have an answer to what are we avoiding, but it's avoiding is within itself what we're doing. And I think I'll go back to something I said earlier, like we all have some plasticity in us, like, you know, everyone. And I think right now what we're obsessed with is like finding ourselves and like meditating and taking time. And what a healthy life means is taking time for ourselves, and how our generation is, well, and probably more so younger than us, are taking that into account a lot more. What does happiness mean? You know, not following traditional career paths, doing their own thing, moving countries because they can and they feel like it, and why not? And I think that it's finding out who we are is something which people are more engaged with. So I think there's going to be, I mean, if you take it to its logical conclusion, like, well, does that mean that we'll see less like big sort of plastic cultures and plastic people because we're like slightly more engaged on a level, and we call things out more? You know, people, for example, the whole Instagram like hiding like counts, and people being really for that because it's ruining how we see ourselves and how we see the world. You know, are we going to therefore, everything's reaction to that? I think there's like human nature, there's always going to be a herd mentality, there's always going to be that playing a part in you know, that's just who we are as human sort of needs and base instinct. But I think that I think that it's something which that the avoidance potentially is potentially declining. But it's like that, you know, the plastic person in a car in a convertible, this is like 90s Barbie, like this is where we get it from. And that world's, you know, that concept is no longer acceptable. So potentially in real life it's not either.
I take my takeaway from this would be the plastic culture is something I actually would like to try to understand more how someone gets to that place. So I'm going to take it as sort of an individual challenge to engage with those people, and less kind of judge and dismiss them, because I think there's probably a lesson to be learned in what gets people there. I think that's sort of on a more one-to-one level, my realization from this. Just, I don't think I actually know those people and what makes them tick. I can't imagine what would make someone go to those lengths to conform to what they think people want them to be and do. And there's probably a learning lesson there on that. So
a final point that I want to introduce, and I'm not sure I'm going to shift it into a question, but I just want to throw it in this space, is just celebrity. You know, I think we all know there's a certain plasticity, so to speak, of celebrity. And within that, to reflect on what you're saying, Chris, there's almost this loss of empathy that we allow. And I think it's because we fetishize celebrity in this way where we almost want their plasticness to be available to us so that we can disengage from it. and so that we can other them in a way that fits our narratives about how people exist and live in the world. So the Kardashian family is a great example of this. We follow their story in a way that's, we pretend to care, but it's definitely disingenuous because we love their plasticity. We love that it's like this completely out of touch, ungrounded way of existing that's almost inaccessible to us. And through that, we can't apply the same empathy we might be able to give to the struggling mother of two on the streets of Harlem. And so I guess what I'm trying to explore here is there seems to be this thing that pops up throughout popular culture of us just like, getting off on plastic things.
Yeah.
And I find that immensely interesting and immensely worth exploring. As you're saying, we should be curious about it, but I don't know what it means, and I don't know what it says about us, and most importantly, I don't know if it's permanent and needs to endure.
There's something attractive about it. I don't know what it is. It's almost like it's primal in a sense, and I think it's probably could even be another podcast that we do on celebrity.
Why not?
But it's a really interesting point to go into.
Yeah,
Nicola, do you have any questions or thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, as you say, I think it is a whole other topic, but I'm trying to be very optimistic here, which is unlike me, but I think that, you're totally right. Like, what's the Kardashians? It's like 16th season, like something insane.
Goodness.
Yeah, and like, the obsession over here with Love Island and like reality TV and Love and Hip Hop and all these shows, like it's endured. Like, yes, things have died and come back to life, but like it's basically endured. And maybe is this a good sign in the fact that it's seen as other to us because we see ourselves as more authentic and a bit more true and a little bit more in touch. And it's like a zoo, right? We're like, oh, there's such different species to us. Like, what are they doing? Oh, let's look at them from our viewing platform and just like view their lives and pretend that we think we know what's going on, but it's an escape. And that's what entertainment is. I mean, it's entertainment, right? It's an escape. And yeah, are celebrities therefore the most plastic form of people and culture out there? Are they the most divorced from their true selves? I think that's definitely something which has an argument for yes.
Let's close on that note, just because I know we could go for a lifetime on this, and I know if I were to allow my deepest desires to come forth, I would go into this a bit deeper. But let's end here for now, and if we need to continue the conversation in another podcast, let's try to. This was really good. Thank you both for such insightful, considerate, thoughtful opinions on a very ambiguous topic. And I hope one of the things that the listeners take from this is that we didn't try to apply an expertise onto the conversation because that in itself would be disingenuous, but we wanted to highlight some of the questions we possibly should be asking about it, because I think it does say something important about who we are as individuals and groups and what that means for us moving forward. So if we can have a final word from each of you guys, if you want to, on what you think we should take forward from this conversation, and take the space to plug anything you think worth plugging as well.
Nicola, go ahead, lead us off.
Okay, what do I take from this conversation? I think that it's dangerous to label anything, honestly. To label anything or anyone at this point. I think we should be beyond that. I think we've grown out of that. It's not fair. It's not accurate. It's just not. I think by definition, if we think we see plastic people out in the world or cultures or groups or whatever, whether it be on TV or in real life, how do we know? right? Is that a persona they're putting on for the external world? And actually they're very happy in their true selves and whatever they get on in their real lives. Like, we don't know. And I think that it's something to bear in mind in terms of how divorced a plastic person or plastic personality can be from their true self. Can we actually live quite sort of dual existences? And that is our authentic, that is our true self, because we're actually in control of it. Is that something that we should be thinking about?
Brilliant.
I think to this quote, I'm not sure who to attribute it to, but like, love the one you're with. And I think like Nicola said, like this whole labeling thing, like it's easy to like label someone and then treat them in a certain way. And I'm going to challenge myself to, like, when I see someone and I put this mental label on who they are, I'm trying to categorize them in my mind as a way to sort of decide where I am in terms of the hierarchy of being better than them, I guess, is what I'm doing in my mind. Just kind of putting that aside for a moment and trying to just realize these people who might be seen as plastic are also people. And they're, you know, they have value just like I do and anyone else does that we consider to be more of an authentic person. So I think I think this is a reflection on our own prejudices, and that those should be considered and reflected upon as much as we're reflecting upon other people that might be we'd call plastic.
Brilliant. Very good stuff from both of you. I feel so well fed spiritually for this conversation. You guys both brought real party favors to the barbecue. So I thank you both. If you, the listeners,